It's probably the largest engineering project in the Arctic ever, when the United States sent lots of cargo and many thousand men to Thule to establish an airbase.
In 1966, the United States abandoned a nuclear-powered city beneath the Greenland ice sheet. What no one planned for was this: that ice is now melting faster than at any time in human history, and buried beneath it is a mistake the modern world is not prepared to clean up. For decades, the world believed this frozen grave was a sealed relic of the Cold War, a secret safely tucked away under layers of accumulating snow. However, modern science has recently proven that calculation was fatally wrong. Data from ice-penetrating radar and sophisticated climate models reveal that this eternal tomb is thawing, preparing to release a toxic legacy that was never meant to see the light of day. What lies beneath the ice today is not just a forgotten military outpost, but a 60-year-old error on a collision course with a warming planet. As the ice continues to melt, the question is no longer if this poison will escape, but who will pay the price when these Cold War secrets are finally set free. Imagine the sheer scale of this oversight. A hidden base, once buzzing with life, now poised to unleash environmental havoc that could ripple across oceans in generations. This isn't a distant hypothetical, it's a ticking environmental bomb, fueled by decades of denial and accelerating climate change. The glaciers that were supposed to entomb this nightmare forever are cracking under the strain of rising temperatures, and the contaminants locked within are inching closer to freedom every day. Scientists warn that the melt is not just a slow drip, it's an accelerating cascade, driven by record-breaking heat waves and shifting weather patterns. This revelation forces us to confront how past ambitions have sown seeds of present peril, turning a symbol of military ingenuity into a harbinger of ecological disaster.
To understand how we got here, we must examine the official story presented to the public in 1959. At the height of the Cold War, the U.S. Army announced a fantastic project in Greenland, a fully functioning city carved 8 meters deep into the ice, roughly 200 kilometers from the coast. This was Camp Century, officially touted as a peaceful scientific research station designed to study Arctic construction techniques and weather patterns. The Army marketed Camp Century as an engineering marvel. It was a complete underground town housing up to 200 soldiers and scientists who enjoyed luxuries unimaginable in the Arctic at the time. The facility included heated prefabricated wooden buildings, a hospital, science laboratories, a movie theater, a library, a barber shop, and even a chapel for worship. Residents could take hot showers and eat high-quality meals featuring steak and fresh vegetables, all while fierce winds howled across the surface above. For many soldiers stationed there, Camp Century didn't feel like a secret base. It felt like a strange, frozen hometown. Birthdays were celebrated, films were watched, and routines felt almost ordinary. Men gathered in the mess hall for card games after shifts, sharing stories from back home, while the nuclear hum provided a constant backdrop. Scientists scribbled notes in labs, dreaming of breakthroughs in polar research, while soldiers maintained the machinery that kept this icy utopia alive. It was a bubble of normalcy in one of the harshest environments on Earth, where the isolation bred a unique camaraderie. Letters home described the wonder of living under the ice, with hot coffee always available and the aurora borealis occasionally glimpsed during surface excursions. This semblance of everyday life masked the deeper purpose, making the eventual revelations all the more shocking. The heart of this city under the ice was the PM-2A, the world's first portable nuclear reactor. This revolutionary engine provided constant electricity and heat, eliminating the need for dangerous truck convoys to haul diesel oil across the treacherous ice.
The Army was so proud of this achievement that they invited journalists and even groups of Boy Scouts to tour the facility, showcasing it as a symbol of human progress and the ability to master any environment. These tours painted a picture of innovation and peace, with smiling faces posing beside the reactor's controls, oblivious to the shadows lurking below. The publicity machine worked overtime, releasing films and articles that highlighted the scientific endeavors, from drilling ice cores to monitoring seismic activity. It was all part of a carefully crafted narrative designed to deflect suspicion, while the real work hummed in the depths. However, for a simple scientific outpost, the logistics were illogical and excessively expensive. When investigators look at the paper records today, the receipts of the project, a different story emerges. A normal Arctic research station requires food, medicine, and light scientific instruments, but the cargo lists for Camp Century revealed massive shipments of reinforced steel and huge quantities of cement used for permanent foundations, materials a temporary research station would never need. These weren't just minor overages, they were deliberate excesses, hinting at a scale far beyond weather studies. Crates upon crates arrived via airlifts and overland treks, straining the limits of Cold War-era transportation. The most revealing piece of evidence was the importation of massive, industrial-scale tunneling machines from Switzerland. These machines were designed to carve long tunnels through solid rock in the Alps for highways and railroads. Why would a small group of scientists studying ice thickness need the most powerful tunnel-digging machines in the world? The sheer tonnage of material moved by giant caterpillar tractors, known as heavy swings, suggested a construction project far beyond the needs of a 200-person laboratory. These tractors, with their massive treads chewing through snow, hauled loads that could only support something monumental. Declassified manifests show shipments that included not just drills and bits, but specialized ventilation systems and electrical grids capable of powering an underground metropolis. The costs ballooned into millions, far exceeding any research budget, raising eyebrows even among those in the know. This paper trail of a lie exposed the facade, piece by piece, as historians pieced together the puzzle years later. It wasn't about science, it was about strategy, hidden in plain sight under the guise of exploration. The truth lay in the hidden levels below the public spaces. While typical polar research hallways are narrow to conserve heat, the lower levels of Camp Century featured cavernous tubes of enormous dimensions. Inside these tunnels, engineers had installed a fully operational, large-scale railway system with parallel steel tracks stretching deep into the darkness. These weren't makeshift paths, they were precision-engineered lines, complete with switches and signals, buried in the ice like veins in a frozen body. A glaciology lab has no use for an underground train to shuttle core samples. Instead, archival records show technicians were conducting rigorous stress tests on these rails, running simulated loads weighing tens of tons to see how the metal and compacted snow base reacted to extreme weight. This physical evidence confirmed that Camp Century was built to be a hub for something massive that moved on tracks, something intended to remain hidden beneath the ice at all times. Engineers logged hours of data, pushing the system to its limits, ensuring it could handle the relentless cold and pressure. Blueprints, now public, reveal blueprints for expansions that dwarfed the visible base, with tunnels branching out like a subterranean spiderweb. The air in those lower levels was thick with the scent of oil and metal, a stark contrast to the clean labs above. This was the underbelly, where the true mission simmered, away from prying eyes. Everything the public was shown, the science labs, the chapel, the movie theater, was real, but it was never the reason Camp Century existed. The answer was finally declassified in 1997. Camp Century was merely the cover for a much larger, more ambitious mission, Project Iceworm. The ultimate objective was to turn the island of Greenland into a gigantic, invisible nuclear launch platform. This wasn't a modest outpost, it was the prototype for a doomsday network that would have reshaped global warfare. The Pentagon's plan called for an incredible network of 4,000 kilometers of tunnels, an area 3 times the size of Denmark. This labyrinth would house a fleet of 600 medium-range nuclear missiles dubbed Iceman, which were modified Minuteman missiles adapted for mobile rail cars. These trains would move constantly through the tunnels, making it impossible for the Soviet Union to track their location. If ordered to fire, the trains would stop at pre-selected points, bore a hole through the ice ceiling, and launch their warheads over the North Pole toward targets in the USSR. The concept was audacious, a mobile arsenal, perpetually shifting, immune to satellite detection or preemptive strikes. Engineers envisioned a self-sustaining system with supply depots and maintenance bays dotted along the routes. The Iceman missiles were engineered for the cold, with reinforced casings to withstand the sub-zero temperatures. This geopolitical deception was carried out without the knowledge or consent of Denmark, which had sovereign authority over Greenland and a strict policy against nuclear weapons on its territory. Camp Century's peaceful scientists were, in effect, the unknowing support staff for a secret doomsday machine. Many of those involved believed they were advancing science, only to learn decades later of the nuclear shadow they cast. The operation relied on layers of secrecy, with compartmentalized knowledge ensuring no one saw the full picture. It was a masterclass in Cold War paranoia, where trust was a luxury and deception a necessity. Despite the strategic genius of the plan, Project Iceworm contained a fatal flaw. The military misunderstood the physics of the ice sheet. Engineers viewed the glacier as a static, solid platform, like rock or concrete. In reality, a glacier is a viscoelastic body, essentially a slow-moving river of solid ice that flows under its own immense weight and gravity. This wasn't inert ground, it was alive, shifting imperceptibly but relentlessly. By 1962, field measurements revealed the ice was moving and deforming far faster than predicted. The glacier was relentlessly trying to close the wounds carved into it. Walls bulged inward, ceilings sank, and the massive steel support frames were twisted like soft. Reports from the time described the eerie creaks and groans echoing through the tunnels, like the base was breathing. The deformation wasn't uniform. Some sections collapsed entirely, burying equipment under tons of ice. This war with nature highlighted the hubris of the project, man versus an ancient force that had shaped continents. Realizing the battle was unwinnable, the U.S. ordered a full evacuation in 1966. They removed the nuclear reactor, but left almost everything else behind, including the infrastructure and a vast inventory of hazardous waste. The retreat was hasty, with personnel airlifted out as the ice closed in, leaving a ghost town frozen in time. The decision to walk away was based on the belief that annual snowfall would bury the waste deeper and deeper, sealing it forever in a safe, icy tomb. This left behind a staggering amount of pollution, 9,200 tons of physical waste, including building infrastructure and construction debris. That's enough scrap to fill a small landfill, rusting away in the cold. 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, stored in barrels that have long since begun to corrode. 240,000 liters of wastewater and sewage, frozen but not forgotten. Unknown quantities of PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, toxic chemicals used in paints and insulation that are known to cause cancer. These persistent pollutants don't break down easily. They linger, waiting for release. 1.2 billion becquerels of radioactive material, including radioactive cooling water that was discharged directly into subsurface wells in the ice. This radiation from the reactor's operations was dumped with little regard for long-term effects. For decades, these materials stayed locked in the crystal lattice of the ice. But as global temperatures rise, the containment mechanism is disappearing. The once permanent freeze is giving way to slush and streams, unlocking these hazards bit by bit. Modern scientific data shows that the Greenland ice sheet is no longer in a state of mass accumulation. It is now in a state of mass loss. Summer melting is occurring faster and longer than ever before, removing more ice than winter snow can replace. Scientists, led by William Colgan, have warned that the ice covering Camp Century could begin net melting as early as the 2090s. Colgan's scheme, using satellite data and on-site cores, has mapped the accelerating thaw, predicting tipping points where melt becomes irreversible. As the surface melts, water does not just sit on top, it percolates downward through cracks in the firn, compacted snow, reaching depths of 30 to 40 meters where the waste is located. This meltwater acts as a solvent, infiltrating rusting diesel drums and dissolving toxic PCBs. This creates a toxic plume, an invisible poisonous cloud that will migrate through internal channels in the glacier toward the coast. There will be no explosion, no alarm, just contamination, slowly, invisibly. The plume could spread over years, seeping into groundwater and rivers, carried by the glacier's flow. Once these toxins reach the marine ecosystem near Thule, they will enter the food chain. Through a process called bioaccumulation, plankton absorb the toxins, which then concentrate as they move up the chain to fish, seals, and eventually the local indigenous communities who rely on these animals for food. Inuit hunters, whose diets are rich in marine life, face the highest risks, with contaminants building up in their bodies over time. Studies already show elevated PCB levels in Arctic wildlife, a preview of what's to come. This isn't abstract, it's a direct threat to health, culture, and survival in one of the world's most vulnerable regions. This environmental crisis is compounded by a complete paralysis of international responsibility. A three-way diplomatic stalemate has emerged between the United States, Denmark, and Greenland. The U.S. argues that under the 1951 Defense of Greenland Agreement, they had the right to abandon the facilities and that the responsibility for cleanup now lies with Denmark. This treaty, signed in the shadow of World War II, granted broad military access but didn't anticipate environmental legacies. Denmark, however, contends it was never fully informed about the nuclear nature of the project or the scale of the hazardous waste. Official protests have been lodged, with declassified cables showing early suspicions but no action. Meanwhile, Greenland, now a self-governing territory, lacks the hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars, and the advanced technology required to excavate the site. The logistics alone are daunting. Drilling through miles of ice, handling radioactive materials, all in a remote, harsh environment. Greenland's leaders, including Foreign Affairs Minister Vitus Quaokitsoq, have urged Denmark to take action, noting that the waste includes radioactivity and PCB pollution. Quaokitsoq's statements highlight the injustice, as Greenland bears the brunt without the resources. Former Premier Aleqa Hammond has even suggested bringing the matter before a UN panel on indigenous issues, warning of a potential political crisis. Hammond's advocacy underscores the human cost, framing it as a colonial hangover affecting native peoples. Negotiations drag on, with finger-pointing replacing progress, while the ice melts unchecked. Camp Century was originally conceived as a monument to human mastery over nature. Today, it serves as a harsh lesson about the limits of artificial intervention. Short-sighted military decisions from the 1960s have left ecological scars that will last for centuries.
The people who built Camp Century believed the ice would last forever. The same assumption we are still making today. Burying waste beneath the ice was never a permanent solution. It was merely a postponement of consequences. As the permanent ice melts, it reveals a fundamental truth. There is no such thing as a permanent landfill. National borders and old treaties mean nothing when toxins spread through the water and air. Pollutants don't respect sovereignty. They flow with currents, carried by winds and waves to distant shores. The nuclear ghost of Camp Century is waking up. The boundary between forgotten history and present-day catastrophe is dissolving with every degree the planet warms. We are left with a final, terrifying reality. The mistake of the Cold War is no longer in the past, it is actively flowing into our future. The clock is ticking, and the ice is running out. This legacy demands action now, before the thaw turns irreversible, forcing us to reckon with the hidden costs of power and progress. What started as a bold experiment has become a cautionary tale, reminding us